It's time to be about that life, the startup life. Here's your host, Dominic Lawson.
All right, Startup Nation. So I hope you're ready to receive some value today. My name is Dominic Lawson, and this is the Startup Life, the show for entrepreneurs and career-minded professionals. You know, Startup Nation, when we're on that path of entrepreneurship and building our business and growing our brand, sometimes we get stuck. Sometimes we get stuck with how to proceed forward. Sometimes we get stuck with trying to find that balance, that professional and personal balance, and being happy with life, which is why we have an amazing guest for you today. He is a business coach, a high performance coach, and also a 3-time World Series winner pitcher, if you will. His name is Todd Stottlemyre, and he is the author of The Observer, a modern fable on mastering your thoughts and emotions. He is, once again, Startup Nation, Todd Stottlemyre. Big Todd, what's up, boss?
Dominic, how are you, sir, man? I got to tell you, I'm excited to hang out with you on your show. I appreciate you having me. I'm humbled and honored, and hopefully together today we can create some incredible value for your audience.
I definitely think we're going to do that. We're especially, Todd, as you know, I don't need to tell you, we're at a day and time where we need a little encouragement. We need a little positive content. So I'm definitely glad to have you on and kind of help us out with that, if you don't mind. Good, sir. So I really appreciate that.
Very good.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this, man. So, we're on the other side of 2020 now. It's definitely was one for the ages. Just kind of share your just kind of general thoughts and how you navigated the new normal that was 2020, and what did you learn from it to come out better, bigger, better, and badder for 2021?
Wow, such a great question, and it's a powerful question, and I would tell you that. We run a lot of businesses, my partner and I, and we have a number of companies and when COVID hit and shutdowns hit and businesses were being shut down, here's what I'll say is that those were all things out of our control.
Right.
The problem when we get into a situation where so many different things are going on that are out of our control, what happens to the individual, to the business owner, to the athlete, to the person is we start to focus on so many things that we can't control that we forget to focus on the things that we can control. And it's a trap, man. And I remember saying, in that first week, the first thing that happened was I was like everyone else, kind of taken to your knees, like, oh crap, what are we going to do now? Right. But here's the thing is like, you can't stay there long, because if you stay there long, it starts to become you. So we started to kind of right away jump back to our feet and say, what can we do? And I remember saying to all the executives of our company, listen, we're either going to come out of this better or we're going to come out of this worse.
Right.
That's going to be a choice. Those are the decisions that we got to make daily on focusing on what can we control? How can we get better? What's the focus every single day? And I remember saying to these guys, I said, listen, this too shall pass. Right. We don't know when. We don't know how. It's not really something we can control. But what we can control is what we do daily. And we can control whether we come out better or worse because of this time. So it becomes a very simple focus. And that focus for us, and as we've gone through 2020, is what can I do that I can control? What is it that I can do? And then go focus on that. So a lot of lessons coming out of 2020. I tell you, I believe that people began learning more about themselves than any other time potentially in history, because every single day our emotions and our thoughts were challenged through 2020. And what trap will you fall in, or how will you protect those thoughts and emotions? And will you focus on the right things and take the right daily actions? I know that's a mouthful, but 2020 is a mouthful.
2020 is a mouthful, a handful, a footful, and everything else you can think of. So no, I definitely understand and definitely appreciate that, because look, I know a lot of people, they felt like a lot of things were out of their control. And you talk about just focusing on things that you can control, just super important. And we've had many people who come on the show, Todd, and they shared a lot of the same sentiments, especially one of them is, what do you want to be after this is over? Because it's not going to be here forever. You know what I mean? And so I appreciate you sharing that and being transparent about it, man.
Well, what's funny is, like, you have a choice every single day. Do you want to focus on your current or past circumstances and that baggage? Do you want to focus on where you want to go and what vision you have for your life?
For sure.
And I can tell you, what's funny is, I look back on 2020 and it's not that far out. Obviously, we just jumped into 2021, and
right.
But I remember being in 2019 and kind of some of the things that I wanted to accomplish and do in 2020. And that one was truly was to write the book, The Observer.
Right.
I had no idea that I knew where I wanted to go with The Observer, because it was really, for me, it was about overcoming my mess, and that mess becoming my message of negative thinking and this place, this emotional state that I kept ended up in. But I had no idea that book was going to mirror our country and mirror the world.
Right.
And what I mean by that is, I had to overcome hate and guilt. And I got to tell you, if you look back to 2020, how many people, how they lived from a place of hate instead of love.
Right.
And instead of understanding that, I think when I look back on 2020, I think of COVID, I think of race, I think of politics.
Right.
And then if I titled it, it would be like hate. I mean, think about how hateful we became because of COVID.
Right.
How hateful did we become because of race? And how hateful did we become because of politics?
Right.
And our reactions to those things? So hateful. And it's actually why I even wrote The Observer, because I was at a place in my life where I looked great from the outside, but on the inside, I was living a very hateful and guiltful and unforgiven place that was very dark.
For sure. And once again, Startup Nation, that book is The Observer, just like Todd said, a modern fable on mastering your thoughts and emotions. And Startup Nation, that book is now available now. That book is now available today. We have a link there in the show notes for easy access if you listen to the replay on the podcast. And go ahead and purchase that book. I really think it's timely. So Todd, let me just ask you this, man, because you wrote it as a fiction, as a fiction novel. You know what I mean? Which you normally when people write books, like yourself being a high performance coach and stuff like that, they don't normally go that route. Why did you decide to go the route of like the fiction novel route, I guess?
Yeah. So, the book, I guess, could have been written as a memoir.
Right.
And it's pretty odd. There's a few main characters in the book. Obviously, a lady by the name of Kat, who's an entrepreneur. The story is really built around her. She has a 15-year-old son, and then she has a father that kind of lived a legendary life. Here's what I would tell you. There are a lot of the stories of the fiction of the characters going through the storyline that really mirrored my life as I went through my life.
Right.
And a lot of the situation and is why didn't I write it as a memoir was I wanted to be relatable to everyone.
Gotcha.
See, I believe I'm relatable. I'm humble. I don't believe that, I had any special DNA or genes. But the problem was I grew up with a legendary father, and my playground was Yankee Stadium. Right. So the second I try to coach or teach people or tell them about my story, the first thing that they're going to say, yeah, Todd, but you stood in the outfield grass next to Mickey Mantle.
Right.
That's true.
Right.
And what happens is, but even though I looked so great, I had this incredible environment I grew up with, had incredible parents, I inherited their relationships. I mean, everything is great. The problem is I also went through trials and tribulations, had problems, had setbacks, just like everyone else. So by making it a story, building characters, my hope is that as people read the book, that they'll get in touch with the character, that they'll feel the character, going through the story, the setback, the failure, the disappointment, and then it becomes relatable to them. And as it becomes relatable to them, there's tools and principles that person that today it might be going through a struggle. There's a tool chest that is weaved throughout the characters and the storyline where you can grab onto those tools and you can know 100% certain that there's a better way to live and that you can pursue your best self.
For sure.
100%.
For sure.
Yeah,
no,
man.
And I appreciate that because I think a lot of times, unfortunately, people look at, people such as yourself with, your dad and Yankee Stadium being your playground, and even other entrepreneurs, they see the glitz and the glam, and it's like, oh, how is this guy going to tell me how to build my business from the ground up? He's got it all. But like when you dive into the stories, and like you just said, man, and the Observer really highlights that, like everybody's dealing with something. You know what I mean? It's not all like, unicorns and rainbows for everybody, no matter how it looks on the outside. You know what I mean? And I think that goes a long way to that relatability piece. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Well, there's no overnight success.
Right.
And,
right.
You kind of get rewarded as it seems overnight. I don't know who said this, but it was genius. You get rewarded in public for what you do in private. And what you do in private is what people don't see. They don't see the entrepreneur go through all the heartache, the daily grind, year after year. And then all of a sudden it's like that entrepreneur hits it. Everything comes together. And then it's like, wham, they hit the marketplace and they hit the public's attention. And it's like, wow, where did they come from? About a decade worth of pain. Right, exactly. That's where they came from. Exactly. They came through a decade worth of pain that you'll never see and that people sometimes will never understand. But I love that saying. I don't know who said it, but you get rewarded in public for what you do in private. And that's athletics, that's business, that's life, man.
For sure, for sure. You know what? And in the book, you talk about this idea the 180 thinking, right? You always hear 360 thinking, but you talk about 180 thinking, and Kat kind of goes through that on her journey. Kind of share that with us a little bit, if you don't mind, Todd.
Well, I learned it from my mentor. So
gotcha.
Harvey Dorfman, who wrote The Mental Game of Baseball,
gotcha.
Who really became, my guy. And from 1993, the winter of 1993. So from my 1994 season until I was finished. And it was all about thought replacement. Okay, I have you think about all the thoughts that run through your mind every single day. And it's like, I think science tells us there's about 26,000 different thoughts. And a lot of those are negative is the problem. And if you get hung up on a negative thought and you begin to focus on it, and then it begins to drive your emotions, pretty soon you got negative outcomes. So the 180-degree mindset takes you from a negative thought replace the negative thought with a positive thought. Well, where is that? That's 180 degrees away. Mm-hmm. See, it goes from I can't to I can. It goes from sad to happiness, and it goes from, playing victim to playing warrior. So the 180-degree mindset is nothing more than replacing a negative thought with a positive thought, then begin to focus on the positive thought. The positive thought will then drive positive emotions that will then drive a positive action. But it all goes back to that very simple thought. Look, we have a choice every day to choose happiness. Right. See, happiness doesn't go from the outside in. Happiness happens that we choose to be happy from the inside. It's not something that happens from the outside. We can't go out and find it. We have to choose to live it. Right.
Right. For sure. Thank you for sharing that. I want to ask.
And you can take that 180 degrees. And what's so awesome about it is that whole mindset and thought process around it is like, okay, so sometimes emotions will drive your thought, though. Mm-hmm. Sometimes your thought will drive your emotions. Sometimes your emotions will drive your thought. You say, man, I don't feel good. Well, can't I change that by saying, you know what? I feel good. I feel great. Today's like a great day. Instead of this moment, man, I'm having a tough moment. And then pretty soon what happens is I go from a tough moment and then I start saying, man, I'm having a bad day. I'm like, no, you're not having a bad day. It's the same day for everyone. you're just having a tough moment. But how about if we switch the psychology and perspective of the thought, the feeling, or the moment and say, hey, you know what? This is great. This is great that I'm going through this tough time because I'm getting better. That's a 180-degree different perspective. So I could go from a 180-degree mindset, 180-degree perspective, 180-degree emotional feelings, and take myself from a negative state of being into a positive state of being.
Right.
And that is so important as an athlete, but it's also so important as a business owner or an entrepreneur, but it's also so important as a friend, being a friend to someone else. Right. It just applies in life, man.
Right. Let me ask you this, Todd, because, I'm curious about let's dive deeper to what you just said, right? Like, I'm curious about a time when in your playing days, whether it be, in the show or in the business world, where you had to kind of like check those emotions a little bit. Can you share a story with that from your personal? Yeah. Kind of share that with us.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Yeah. And it's really the making of the book. It goes back to 1993. And, this is after growing up in Yankee Stadium and hanging out with my father and every day as he was a New York Yankee, and then having a dream, and then being able to be lucky enough to live that dream out, to play Major League Baseball. And here I find myself after my 5th year in Major League Baseball. I'm a 2-time world champion. 1993, we just won the 2nd world championship and did it back to back, 92, 93 with the Toronto Blue Jays. And if you would have looked at me, Dominic, from the outside, here's a guy in his 20s,
right?
Lived out his childhood dream, making millions of dollars, now a 2-time world champion. Mm-hmm. From the outside, you'd been like, wow, storybook life.
Absolutely.
Problem was, I looked in the mirror and I could not stand the person looking back at me. And that's because more than a decade prior to that moment, and the winter of 1993, it was 12 years earlier. I was 15 years old. My little brother was 11. He was on his 3rd bout of leukemia. The doctors told our family his only chance for survival and a long-term life was a bone marrow transplant. Our entire family, they tested our blood. I would happen to be the perfect match. I laid down and gave my little brother a bone marrow transplant that ultimately put his body into a coma that ultimately took his life. I'll never forget that his last breath and being in the hospital and being at the hospital with my mom, my dad, my older brother, Mel Jr. And of course it hit our family like a ton of bricks, and we were taken to our knees as a family. It was very tragic. And I always say, man, just imagine a mother and father burying their 11-year-old son. And we know that today someone's listening today to this story and relates to it because they probably went through a similar situation.
Right.
And, but as a 15-year-old kid who gave the bone marrow transplant, man, I was sad, but I had 2 other emotions that I left that hospital with. I left with hate and I left with guilt. I was like, man, it's my marrow that put him into a coma. And no one could tell me any different. And, what would happen was I got to a point in my life where I was just sick and tired of the same emotional breakdowns, either on a baseball field or even in life.
Right.
I just kept ending up in the same place over and over and over. And at the end of 1993, and I had all this hate. And what would happen was, anytime I couldn't control something that I tried to control or got into conflict, the hate and guilt would literally come to the surface and always ruin the mastery of the moment. So what was happening is I was living in this prison of unforgiveness. I refused to forgive myself for my little brother's death, as if I could have controlled it.
Right.
See, but the problem was it kept blocking me from living and performing at my highest levels, on the field and off the field.
Right.
So I reached out to Harvey and I said, Harvey, this is Todd Stottlemyre. And he says, man, I've been waiting on your call. And I was like, I didn't even know you knew who I was, Harvey. He goes, oh, I've been watching you. And I said, Harvey, I need help. He says, yeah, I know. And we booked a meeting. It was supposed to be about a 2-hour meeting. It ended up going 12 hours in a hotel room.
Wow.
In the first hour, Harvey asked me the question. He said, Todd, would you do it again? And I said, do what? He says, would you give a bone marrow transplant to your little brother again? And I broke down. I sobbing. I'm crying like a baby. Mm-hmm. And I said, man, I do it every minute of every hour of every day of every week of every month. I do it every year. I do it over. And he says, well, didn't you do that already? And I said, yeah. He said, Todd, did you do everything you could possibly do? I said, Harvey, I did everything I could do. He said, Todd, you're not God. Let it go. Right. You didn't kill your little brother. And I was like, for the first time, someone gave me permission and took me to a place of letting it go. You see, I was carrying 12 years of baggage around my neck and over my shoulders and everything I did in life. And I just had refused up until that point to let it go. And it was liberating as hell. The last hour, he said, Todd, he says, I'm going to put you on a 7-day challenge. He says, you're not allowed to respond or react to anything. And I was kind of like, I don't understand. He said, listen, anytime emotionally you start to get excited or mentally your brain starts to go and you start to get excited about either a challenge or a conflict or a reaction, he says, you're not allowed to react or respond. You can only document what are you thinking, and you can only document what are you feeling. He said, I want you to stand back from yourself and become the observer of your thoughts and become the observer of your emotions. And in 7 days, we're going to go through this and we're going to build a toolbox. And in this toolbox, there's going to be tools. There's going to be models and principles to help you deal with these breakdowns mentally and emotionally to help you stay in peak state performance. I was like, wow. I was so excited.
Right.
That's where the 180-degree mindset comes.
Right.
That's where the power for me of being grateful comes from. That's from where it's like becoming the observer of how we think. Instead of reacting, knee-jerk reactions, what they do is they kind of tell you who you really are deep down. The problem was my knee-jerk reactions were horrible because deep down I was living a dark life of hate, guilt, and unforgiveness.
Right.
So to the audience today, I just want you to know, no matter what has happened in your life, whether you forgive yourself or not, it's time to let it go. It's time, man. It's time to let it go so that you don't destroy 12 years of your life like I destroyed the mastery of my moment for 12 years.
Gotcha.
So that you can absolutely live the champion you were born to live.
Absolutely. That let it go piece. Let's be honest. It's tough. It can be tough because like
it is a lot of times, really difficult.
Right. You know, we live in a place where it's like, what could I've done? You know, and you talked about this just now. Like, what could I have done differently? What could I have done better? What could I have done alternatively? You know what I mean? And so no, that's a big piece. And I appreciate you sharing that and appreciate that transparency, man. I really do. Because I think a lot of people need to hear these stories and hear stories of how, you know, like, look, life throws a ton crap at you sometimes. And a lot of it is just really not your fault. And so, no, I appreciate that, Todd, for sure.
You know, Dominic Harvey said something so important that I don't want to leave out in that moment.
Yeah.
He said, if you would have said no, you wouldn't have done it again. Because think about it. So many people are saying, man, I would never do that again.
Right.
But they're still carrying the baggage from doing it.
Right.
And here's what Harvey said.
Yeah.
Here's what Harvey said. He said, Todd, if you would have said no, I would have told you to change today to honor the defeat, because the defeat and the lesson in our reflection through change will allow us to get better. The point is, you don't have to hang on to yesterday's news. You just don't.
Gotcha. Now that's a big one. Honor the defeat, Startup Nation. I think you might want to hold on to that one. Once again, Startup Nation.
Honor the defeat.
Honor the defeat.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Once again, Startup Nation, we're talking to Todd Stottlemyre, the author of The Observer, a modern fable on mastering your thoughts and emotions. And once again, Startup Nation, that book is available today. We have a link there in the show notes for easy access if you're listening to the replay on the podcast. So Todd, let me ask you this, man, because, I know you transitioned out of baseball and you transitioned into Wall Street and stuff like that. Kind of talk about that transition a little bit, ups, downs, difficulties, kind of talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So for me, it was easy because I knew I'd left it all on the field.
Okay.
My health just wouldn't allow me. My arm, I had a hole in my rotator cuff, tore my labrum and bicep tendon away from the bone. I had nerve damage. I had all these health issues. So I couldn't get back to a place of being good enough to perform at that level. So I knew I'd left every pitch on the field. So for me, the transition was a lot smoother than a lot of guys that still believe they can. Mm-hmm. It's just that nobody wants them.
Right.
I was in a place that no one wanted me and I knew I couldn't.
Gotcha.
So it was like the perfect storm. So
Gotcha.
I knew I had to move on. Now, I when I was done and I retired and it was over and I was so grateful and blessed that I had a lot of people in baseball offer me a lot of different jobs, mm-hmm. everywhere from coaching to front office to radio to TV. And I just knew that if I stayed in the game and up until that point, I was 37 at the time. So I grew up with my father in the game and then basically lived out my adulthood up until that point in the game. So it's all I'd ever done.
Right.
And I was like, man, I want to do something different because my kids were just, we were still having kids. They were young. And I was like, in the baseball world, a lot of night games, that would have meant for me being away from my kids. And at night, I wanted to wake up with them. I wanted to be able to take them to school. I wanted to be a part of their life, go to their events. And I said, I'll figure something else out. And took about 6 months off. And then actually my next door neighbor was a director at a firm and a Wall Street firm. And he says, come into the office, let's talk. And I walked away from there with a job and spent 5 years there. And I got to tell you, it was awesome. I learned so much. We built an asset management team. We had great success, but I just woke up one morning and I said, I don't want to be stuck to an office the rest of my life, and walked in and retired from the firm. And then I launched a fund and did that and found myself back into an office again. And I always tell people, I never said I was smart. I went from one office to the next. and I was like 8 months into that and we were doing well. And I was like, man, I'm stuck again. I don't want to be here. And so I retired and walked away from that and then got involved in some marketing companies. And then ultimately my partner and I, we launched a private fund, just me, he owns half of it. I own half of it.
Gotcha.
And we started to build and develop companies and then through writing books, people started to come and said, hey, will you come speak to our company or our group? And I started working with companies and CEOs and entrepreneurs and helping them and coaching them. And it was always based on reflection of what worked and a reflection of what didn't work in my situation. And I would tell them all the time, look, try this shoe on. It may or may not fit.
Right.
You may have to make some adjustments to the model or to the program, but give it a shot. And then we'll begin to build strategy and process for you. So that's how this whole coaching thing came, book writing and everything else.
I hear that.
All right, Startup Nation. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We got to pay some bills. Once again, my name is Dominic Lawson, and you're listening to The Startup Life. This episode of The Startup Life is powered by Colony Spark. Startup Nation, with our economy in flux, there is a lot of mixed messaging out there. If there was ever a time to take control of the narrative and let your customers know that you're here to serve them, it's now. And that's why you have a friend in Colony Spark. Colony Spark is an omni-channel marketing agency that believes in the power of community to ignite your business. They have helped companies across many industries with lead generation, revenue growth, and more to put them on the path to success. My guy Bill Murphy and his team are very good at what they do. How do I know this? Because not many SEO companies have the stamp of approval of being partnered with Google. Yes, that Google. So I want you to go to www.colonySpark.com www.colonyspark.com/startup to schedule a meeting today. In that meeting, you will review your current marketing activity, receive actionable advice on how to pivot and grow, and ask any marketing questions you may have on navigating over the next few months. Look, Startup Nation, I know things may seem uncertain right now, but if you are looking for a business partner that can help light the way, go with Colony Spark, where they firmly believe in business helping business. All right, Startup Nation, welcome back as we continue our conversation with today's guest here on The Startup Life.
I hear that. I want to ask you something about that. Just go into the weeds just a little bit, because look, a lot of times people who didn't have like, a athletic career and stuff like that, and they see them get into business and stuff like that. It's like, oh, they just got in the door because they're this and they're that. And that's probably some part to that. But, we had on the show, Jake Plummer, longtime quarterback.
Oh yeah.
Denver Broncos, Arizona Cardinals, stuff like that. Right. And he talked about like, look, I may have a name and stuff like that, but I still have to build a business. And so he still had to like knock on doors, make phone calls, people tell him no, stuff like that. Kind of talk about that part, because I don't think a lot of people understand that, like, just because maybe you come from a certain limelight or something like that, you still have to do the work.
Yeah, well, I always say, your name might get you in the door, or something you've done from the past.
Right.
I might get a chance to meet with someone because maybe they were a sports fan, maybe they were a fan of my father, maybe they were a fan of mine, and it allows me to get a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to do real business with real business people, you better be able to do the work. You better be able to back up what you say. And listen, I'm like everyone else, man. It's like, and failure is a big thing to me. I believe it's the multivitamin to success. I believe it's got to be taken every day. And I will tell you that we've had businesses that have been awesome and have great success, but we've also failed miserably, just like everyone else. And like, once again, it's like, what are you willing to do daily? And this is one of the things I talk about a lot. What are you willing to do? You say, man, this is my goal. This is my dream. This is what I want. I say, great. Step 2 is, do you know what it takes?
Right.
So we got to figure out, what does it take for you to hit the dream? And then when we figure it out and we go through the process and we create schedules for, this is what we're going to have to do in order to hit that goal, make that dream, or build that business. Here's the third question, it's most important. Are you willing to do that?
Right.
Are you really willing to do that? And it's funny, you'll see some pictures of entrepreneurs, and it's kind of like the whole building's dark except for one office and with one light on, and it's 3 a.m. and it's 3 a.m. and you're like, there's the entrepreneur, Right. And even though it seems so glorious, entrepreneurship has become like athletics. It's kind of like, it's that thing. It's like, oh, wow.
Right.
Like, you're a successful entrepreneur. I mean, we build pedestals for these people, but we forget the grind. Right. And the grind is question number 3. Are you willing? Are you willing to go through it? And are you willing to continue to go through it when it gets hard? Because I promise you, it's going to get hard.
For sure. I just wanted to highlight that, Startup Nation. Look, like Todd said, a lot of times, people have, a certain way to get them in the door, but you still have to do the work. But in that same vein, I think we all have certain advantages. Maybe for Todd, it was this. Maybe for you, it's that. So I think it's always important to know what your advantage is and really leverage that. But you still have to do the work and build upon what you're leveraging to move forward. So I appreciate that, Todd, for sure.
Yeah, man. I say, if you live in this country and if you're breathing, you have an advantage.
Facts. Big facts. Big facts. And I definitely agree with you there. Let me ask you this, because you talked about earlier about how, people come in to ask you, you're writing books and stuff like that. Once again, go ahead and pick up the Observer, Startup Nation. You want to put that in your entrepreneurial toolkit. But you say that people ask you to come and speak to their company, or maybe you do one-on-one coaching and stuff like that. What's one of those, that one thing, or maybe a few things that people say, this is what I need help with? Like, what are some of those things you're seeing out there that people are kind of needing help with the most, in your opinion?
I can't tell you how many times people will tell me, Todd, I've hit a wall. And I'm like, I get it. I've hit a lot of walls. And I kind of laugh, and they're like, man, Todd, it's not funny. Like I keep hitting the same wall, and it's like I can't get underneath it. I can't get around it. I can't get over it. And I say, that's awesome. So I talk about the power of reflection. See, I'll give you an example. Sure. A casino reflects about every 60 minutes. And what do they reflect? They reflect their cash, money coming in, money going out. If they didn't, they could potentially have a bad run on the casino and it would bankrupt.
Right.
So literally every hour. How about a quarterback in the NFL? Every time that quarterback of the NFL comes off or the defense comes off, what do? They go look at iPads. What are they studying? They're studying the plays they just performed.
Right.
I'm telling you, one of the greatest strategies for when you're banging your head against the wall is go study your past performances and then start to ask yourself questions. What could I do differently? What is there for me to learn here? You'll start to, if you'll ask yourself great questions in your reflection, you'll start to give yourself great answers. On top of that, which is probably even more important, when you study your past performances, you give your work, your grind, your routine, or whatever it is, you give it a different perspective. See, when you're in the heat of the battle, your focus draws tunnel vision, right?
Right.
But when you step on the bank and you reflect and you study a past performance, you start to give yourself a different perspective. And through the different perspective, you start to see your way around the wall. And then you rebuild your strategy and you go take massive action until when? Until the next wall. Because there's another one coming right behind it. I mean, there's no perfect path up the mountain.
Right.
Right. So it's a constant thing. But I'm going to tell you, most people will go through life, or most entrepreneurs, not most, but a lot of them, will go through life and they'll never look back and reflect and study a past performance to learn. There are so many lessons in our reflection and the study of our past performances. And I believe that that's a model for high performance. You want to become a super achiever? You got to fail your face off, reflect on it, change the strategy, take a new action. Very simple, actually. It's just hard to do because it's hard. Why?
Right.
It's hard to do mentally and it's hard to do emotionally, because as you're pounding the wall mentally and emotionally, you start saying things to yourself like, man, maybe this is it. Maybe I'm not like everyone else. Maybe I can't win like them. Maybe they had special DNA or special genetics, or they eat special food. What is it that, and your psychology and your emotional state, they start to wear on you. This is why having a tool chest to stay in peak performance is so important.
For sure. Thank you for sharing that. In that same vein, Todd, I want to ask you this, because look, you talked about the grind and this, that, and the other, and that's great. Like, you're keeping up with the grind, you're doing the day-to-day work and stuff like that. It's a lot like, like a MLB season or just the day-to-day grind of a business. But there comes a time where there's a postseason in MLB, in baseball, or maybe you got a big presentation that's coming up, or a big sales goal you got to hit and stuff like that. What I'm curious to ask you is this: how do you zero in on a target, if you will, right? Forgive the pun because you're a pitcher and stuff like that. But how do you zero in on like that focus? Like, because there's the day-to-day grind, and then there comes a moment where you have to ratchet up because now it's time for you to be clutch. Kind of talk about that zone, that part where you just kind of have to ratchet it up for a particular time right now.
Yeah. So, I'll say, one of the things is, the bigger the project, the bigger the goal, the bigger the dream.
Right.
There are times where you got to put your, I always say, take the right foot, go to the right pedal, press it to the floor, where you just got to go all in and all out.
I hear that.
Right. It's like no return. You're going to go push. Now you can't keep your foot on the pedal to the floor all the time.
Right.
Or what happens? You burn out.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the things and one of the models in the book is I call it, the 4 seasons to your championship life, because There are times where you got to back off, and there are times where you got to push the pedal. I think the best way I can answer this question is you have to figure out what are the 3 to 5 things that you have to master in order to dominate in your industry. I'll give you an example.
Sure.
1992, I was struggling. And I mean, when I say I was struggling as a starting pitcher, I couldn't get to the 5th inning. I mean, I was giving up 8, 9, 10 runs a game. I was with the Toronto Blue Jays. It was 1992. I called my father. I said, Dad, I'm struggling. He goes, I see that. And he was a pitching coach with the Mets at the time. And I said, Dad, it seems like when I make good pitches, they're getting hits. When I make bad pitches, they're hitting like doubles, triples, and home runs. And my father said, actually, I don't see you making many good pitches. See, he had a different perspective than I had at the time. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, he says, listen to me, Todd. He says, if you'll do these 3 things, he goes, you'll dominate. And I'm like, wow. He goes, if you'll stay back in your delivery, finish your delivery strong, and think down in the strike zone. Now, as a starting pitcher in Major League Baseball, staying back, finishing strong, and thinking down, that's simple, by the way. So what my father gave me was 3 things to focus on that were simple. Actually, prior to that moment, in my past, I've mastered those 3 things in order to become a major league pitcher. See, what he was telling me was basically get back to the whiteboard and keep things simple. Matter of fact, he then went on to say there's one more thing. And I was like, here comes the shoe to drop.
Right.
He says on the bill, underneath the bill of your game cap, I want you to write in big bold letters, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. And he goes, now, and he first said, you know what it stands for? And I was like, KISS. He goes, no, keep it simple, stupid. I said, great, Dad, great. Okay. He says, now, do you know what keep it simple, stupid stands for? And I was like, KISS? He goes, no. Keep it simple, stupid stands for stay back, finish strong, think down. Hey, if you're gonna have a 90-day goal, 60-day goal, 30-day goal, you're going up against an earnings report. What are the 3 to 5 things that will drive the numbers more than anything else?
Right.
That better become a major focus every single day for you.
For sure.
It's all about narrowing the focus and spending the time on the things that are going to give us the biggest results.
For sure. And I appreciate that. And you know what? You highlight something else that's kind of been a theme of today's show. You talked about your mentor earlier. You talked about your dad just now. Just talk about really quickly how important mentorship for entrepreneurs is, because it seems like it's been everything for you.
It's the shortcut.
Right.
If there is such a thing as a shortcut to success, I would tell you mentorship, coaching, accountability partners. I know for me, I would have never had any kind of the level of success that I've had in my life without those things, without accountability partners, people doing it with me, people getting in the trench with me, without mentorship, without coaching. I'm not a big believer in people who are self-made. When people say, Todd, I was self-made. I said, really? What'd you do? Yeah, we sold this product. I said, well, if all those people didn't buy that product, you wouldn't have been claiming you're self-made. See, all those people buying your product actually made you. See, I would tell you that coaches and mentors and working partners and accountability partners are so important to your success. I'll keep it very simple for people to really understand. If you go to the gym and you want to work out, you're going to go and you're going to push yourself to a certain point. If you have a trainer, they're going to push you to a new level. By the way, that same psychology, that same format, that same theory works in business, and it works for every aspect of your life. Hey, if you want to have a better marriage, get a marriage coach. You want to have better spirituality, go talk to your pastor. Go talk to the people who know what you're potentially going through, more importantly, know how to get you across the bridge or around the wall. Maybe because they've already done that. They've already been there.
I hear that. Thank you so much for that. Once again, Startup Nation, we're actually wrapping up with Todd Stottlemyre, the author of The Observer, a modern fable on mastering your thoughts and emotions. Once again, if you want to purchase that book, we highly suggest that you do. We have that link there in the show notes for easy access if you listen to the replay on the podcast. Also, if you want to just check out and keep up with Todd, make sure you check out his website, toddofficial.com. That website and link is there in the show notes as well for easy access. Quick baseball question, if you don't mind me, Todd. Just kind of indulge me here a little bit because,
yes, sir.
And I guess it's not just baseball, but just like sports in general. We have a lot of times where, we have new athletes, new generation comes into the league. And sometimes people from the league in the past or whatever, they have like, I don't know, that's kind of not how we do things. That's not a tradition of what we do. A lot of times the new athletes, especially in baseball, where they have like, a lot of like eye black on and stuff like that. They're very emotional and stuff like that. Just kind of talk about, how you feel about the new generation of baseball players and stuff like that.
Well, it's a funny subject, because 1988 was my first year in Major League Baseball. And in 1988, I was a new generation.
Fair enough.
And I went from a new generation by the time I retired in 2002 to an older generation, because in 2002, the new guys coming in became a new generation.
Right.
And I would tell you that, I believe, and I believe that it's based on leadership. Everything rises and falls on leadership. I think John Maxwell said it best, but, it's like, how are we leaving the game when we leave it?
I hear that.
Are we leaving it better or are we leaving it worse? Mm-hmm. And while we were there, and as a veteran player, are you influencing the younger generation the right way? Through appreciation, humility, gratefulness to wear the uniform? I always tell athletes, the name on the front of the uniform is a lot more important than the name on the back of the uniform.
Big time. Because
someday they're going to take the name on the back of the uniform off the uniform. And when they do, the name on the front of the uniform will still exist.
Right.
So, it's really just about being humble and grateful and understanding the humility. And it's like, look, man, those guys, I appreciate athletes so much because, they dedicated their whole life to a certain sport.
Right.
And then to live out that dream. And I know what it takes, and it's not easy and it's hard and you got to work endless hours. But when you get there, the problem a lot of times with athletics is if you start to believe the headline news is going to change drastically for you from a positive to a negative, because you're never as good and you're never as bad as they talk about you, write about you, or whatever it is. And I would just tell you that, I love to see modern day athletes. I love to see their work ethic. I love to see them go through the grind. Mm-hmm. Kobe Bryant, rest in peace, Kobe,
right.
Was someone who, I watched from afar. I never got a chance to meet him, but to understand his humility for the game and how he appreciated the game, how hard he worked. There are lessons from guys like Kobe that the younger generation can learn from and model, so that they, in fact, can also leave the game better than when they arrived.
I hear that. Thank you so much. And I think a lot of that applies to business as well, because like you said, like that name, whether it be the name on the back of the jersey or the nameplate, on the 44th floor, that nameplate is going to change. I definitely understand that for sure. And before I ask the last question, Todd, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the Startup Life and sharing your amazing book. Once again, Startup Nation, that book is The Observer, and a modern fable on mastering your thoughts and emotions. Once again, we have that link in the show notes for you to purchase that book. But Todd, if you would, good sir, just kind of leave us with some words of encouragement for today, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and Dominic, I'll just say in closing, I'm so grateful. I'm humbled. You allowed me to come on. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great things, and because of people like you and your show, you're allowing me to spread the news on something I'm really excited about, and that's my new book, The Observer. But I would tell you, and I keep it very, very simple, is that look, you're going to go through the ups and downs, but the fact of the matter is that everything's possible, and you didn't need to grow up in a certain place for things to be possible for you. And I always tell people, I say, listen, I heard statistically that the chances of us even being here and being born was like 1 in 400 million. Now, I don't know the exact science and percentages and truth of that statement, but imagine us being 1 in 400 million. Isn't at birth we damn near broke the impossible barriers?
There it is.
So the question or the statement I use to follow is, why stop there? See, why stop there? Now you've got a whole life to break down ceilings, take off handcuffs, and break through the barriers of impossible, because on the other side of that is a new possible for you. But in order to break those things, it's going to take you resolving and not quitting and continuing to pursue your greatness, continue to pursue your potential. In closing, they talk statistically that most people live at 40% of their capacity. That means that most people when they take their last breath are going to leave 60% of their potential on the table. And I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, join me in this pursuit to push, to try to get every nth of a degree. And it doesn't just mean money or entrepreneurship or business or athletics. It has to do with fulfillment, being a great friend, being a great brother, being a great sister, a mother, a father, a cousin, a nephew, a niece. It talks about, how we can pursue to just become the best versions of ourselves. And when we wake in the morning and take that breath, be grateful that there's an opportunity for us to pursue that day. God bless.
I hear that. Thank you so much for that. And that's going to wrap up this session of the Startup Life. Once again, I want to thank Todd Stottlemyre for coming on the show. Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me.
No worries. And as always, Startup Nation, if you have an idea, be about that life, the Startup Life.
If you want to let us know what you think about our show, have an idea for a show topic, or would like to advertise on our show, send us a message on the Startup Life Podcast Facebook page. And while you are there, like and follow our page as well. It's a great way for us to engage with you, Startup Nation, and really grow our community. The link is there in the show notes. Subscribe to the show, as it can be heard on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or even on your Facebook timeline or any other platform you like to get your podcast. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and you find our content valuable, please give us a 5-star rating, as it will help us climb the charts and help more people find our show. You can also listen to the show on the Startup Life Podcast new website. There you will find the all-new startup blog, where I write on many topics that are interesting and helpful to you on your path to entrepreneurship. And hey, if you have an idea, be about that life, the Startup Life.